Do not aim low, you will miss the mark. Aim high, and you'll be on a threshold of bliss. I'm Daniel Bradley, and this is In 4 Weeks, where every month I take on a new challenge that's helping me as a man and a father become healthy, wealthy, and wise. So the question that was brought to mind was, how can you incorporate the principles of yoga, such as nonviolence and truthfulness, into your daily life off the mat? So maybe this is more of an ethical argument here or something to reflect on. And it brought to mind this story of when my son, Luke, who was a 2-year-old, now he's 3, and he's just overflowing with imagination. He is just he's just a fount of something crazy and interesting is going to come out of his mouth every time. And he especially loves animals, and especially stuffed animals. And there's a primal directive, a sort of conscious parenting principle that to protect and cultivate imagination in our kids. Sometimes that means immersing yourself in their worlds. He's got a stuffed animal and he's like, this isn't a dog, this is a whale. And so you have 2 options. You can try to prove to Luke that he's wrong and this is in fact a whale or in fact a dog, or you can dive into the world of this dog-shaped whale and go for an imaginary swim with your child and let yourself be immersed in their imagination and stretch those boundaries. And so it's about the relationship itself. It's about what's going on between the 2 people that's most important. And that kindness and the compassion that shows up through nonviolence and truthfulness can show up in little nuanced ways of really meeting another person where they're at. And so it's about the relationship and how you cultivate values of compassion and truth. So there's 3 ways that I wanted to highlight this for that approach and where we can explore this through our yoga practice. And so the first one is cultivating compassion and kindness towards yourself and others, promoting nonviolence in 3 ways: in your thought, in your words, in your actions. And so this is something that as you engage in your practice, you can really, sometimes things just come up in your mind. I know that many people, this is a recurring theme. Instead of just dismissing thoughts, feeling, memories that show up when you're practicing yoga, instead try to cultivate a habit of receiving those with compassion in your thoughts, words, and actions, and really play those out in your mind while you're going through the postures and positions of your yoga practice. So this could be a way for you to sort of game play out how you would react in certain situations, or maybe think about positive and compassionate ways that you could have reacted in the past. And importantly, like having compassion for yourself, because maybe you're working on something internally where you maybe made the wrong decision or reacted poorly. And so this is an opportunity to cultivate a compassionate response, not just for others, but for yourself. And so the second way that we can cultivate the values of compassion and truth in our relationships through our yoga practice is through honoring truthfulness and authenticity in communication and interactions with yourself and with others. And so that's a mouthful, but honoring truthfulness and authenticity for me simply looks like just being clear with where my limitations are in yoga practice. So I have this wild bell curve of flexibility when it comes to my hamstrings. And when I try to touch my toes just a few days ago, I was very successful. Now, a few weeks ago, it was an awful experience. And a lot of that comes from sitting at a desk and during my day job and on my commute and in the evenings. And that really tightens up my hamstrings. And honoring the reality of where I'm at that moment, waking up in the morning and acknowledging my fatigue in a way that is really honoring my authentic self and what I'm bringing to the mat, and being truthful about that is something that is going to be a good practice for when I'm having a conversation with my wife, and honoring what emotions and thoughts and what I'm bringing to the table and trying to bring my full self to the mat and being whole in that way. The third way that yoga is a laboratory for experimenting with our relationship and how to cultivate compassion and truth would be through mindful choices. And this really shows up in making conscious decisions that are aligned with values and ethical principles in daily life. So we've talked about honoring the truthfulness and authenticity in ourselves and others. We've talked about cultivating compassion and kindness through our thoughts, words, and actions. And so this is where they really come together, and really how we make our choices, making conscious decisions aligned with values and ethical principles. And I talked a lot about this in the previous month through my digital detox, but those conscious decisions become very real when you stop using some of the crutches that show up in our everyday life. So our smartphone, I found, is a huge crutch for me personally when trying to find distractions or little hits of dopamine. And I tend to make more unconscious choices, or to just sort of eat whatever I feel like, or to wake up when I feel like, when I'm using a lot of stimuli in my life to sort of make me just kind of feel numb or just okay. And so that's maybe one thing that has brought you to this and had you watching this, was just because you found that some of the principles in yoga have really challenged the way that you view yourself and how you make your choices and what, motivates you as a person. And so making conscious decisions, cultivating compassion, and honoring that truthfulness are all three different ways that I find that are very helpful when it comes to really aiming high and being on a threshold where you're getting the most out of your yoga practice.